Hi, everyone. This is Spencer Mitchell from the FreightTech Fanatic podcast. Today is January 24th, and we've got on with us today the Chief Product Officer from AJ Cheek. Hey.
Great, Spencer. Great to be here. I'm glad we were able to circle back up. Happy New Year to you.
Yep. Happy New Year to you too. And, I guess nobody will really see the first podcast we did, AJ, but this is our second attempt because of technical issues. It wasn't because of the conversation. The conversation was great. We'll try our best to replicate some of the good things that were said, but also maybe uncover some new things as well.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining today, AJ. We'll start at the beginning, and we use this time to learn a little bit about new technology companies in freight and the leaders behind them. Tell us a little bit about. Can you give us an overview of the company?
Sure. REPOWR is a platform that enables transportation logistics companies to seamlessly share assets. And specifically, we mostly operate in the trailing asset world. So in the OTR space, which is home for us for the most part, we are looking at trailers, dry vans, flatbeds, refrigerated trailers, overwhelmingly dry van in that world. And then we are transitioning with the help of some partners into the intermodal space by way of chassis as well. I'm so excited there, and still very much within our theme of sharing trailing assets.
Awesome. And when did the company start?
So Spencer and Patrick co-founded the company back in January of 2021.
So it's only been 2 years, and you guys have had some great traction in the market. I know that we have some common customers, and I can sort of see how much your network is growing and how quickly it's been growing. Tell us a little bit about the journey over the last couple of years, and where you sit now, and where you've seen the company specifically growing over the past year.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to see. It certainly has been a journey, and a pretty quick one at that. So it started with two guys from Birmingham who are really lifelong friends, Spencer Ware and Patrick Byzantine. And they met kind of after college back in Birmingham. Spencer was in a career in insurance, writing and selling policies to large enterprise fleets, as well as like construction companies, stuff like that, asset heavy policies. And then Patrick worked for transportation logistics companies. So he largely worked for a large flatbed carrier in Birmingham and worked in kind of across their entire org. So he got to see, really the full picture, and I got to see a lot of kind of the inefficiencies around assets and the use thereof. So started locally in Birmingham with fleets there, and just kind of kicking tires on what would an asset sharing platform look like. That really quickly turned into conversations with some of the largest fleets in the U.S., if not the largest fleet in the U.S., actually was our first supplier. And so we got great traction from there. We quickly learned that in order to have a platform where assets are readily available, we've got to partner with the companies that own the overwhelming majority. We might touch on this a little bit later, but it's actually a few organizations. They're not all that many. And by that, I mean the majority of assets are really in the hands of a few, as we currently see here today. And so that's kind of part of our theme and that we help to enable. But we have seen it grow through partnership with largely enterprise fleets and owner operators, really running the kind of full spectrum, and now have seen a lot of adoption from additional players in the spectrum, from 3PLs to shippers to leasing companies and OEMs. And we see more and more traction across all of those verticals as the different players become more and more accustomed, more and more comfortable with sharing equipment with one another.
You mentioned something that was really interesting, which is the majority of assets sit in a handful of players' hands, and that reminded me. I wanted to back up on your initial statement and the overview of the company. So to put it in layman's terms, what REPOWR is enabling is, and we've talked about this before, you've used the word universal trailer network, which is essentially allowing companies to lease assets from one another. You said the majority of trailers and assets sit in a handful of players' hands. And now that's really interesting that you guys are going back to sort of the OEM route and potentially allowing companies, I suppose, maybe to lease assets to owner operators and small companies who are looking to build capacity or sort of grow capacity without making the upfront investment. On the customer side, are Are you seeing, what's the ideal customer looking like in terms of those who are leasing assets, or who are utilizing the assets? Are they companies that aren't necessarily ready to invest in buying more assets, and they want to utilize assets and sort of grow some revenue based on that, or what's sort of the ideal customer profile on those who are utilizing the assets on their side?
Yeah, the really fun part about this, Spencer, is the answer is the best customer is any customer who needs a trailer or a chassis in our world. And so, we actually have the good fortune to be able to service a lot of different profiles. So you may have a new driver in the industry who, is able to get credit for a truck, or may have a lease on opportunity, but can't swing the trailer. And so through us, there's a flexible solution to get that very first trailer. On the complete opposite spectrum, we have enterprise fleets that are, not quite ready to roll out a 5-year purchase order, to the tune of like 15,000 trailers. But maybe they want to buy 500 to 600 trailers, and they want to have flexible capacity for the remaining 1,000 to 1,500. Those are pretty different profiles. The platform can service both. And then the cool thing about it is you've got other, entrants in the space that are gobbling up more and more, or demanding more and more trailer capacity. That could be shippers in their own private fleets, or it could be shippers looking for temporary storage. As we know, warehousing spaces is still at a premium, or it could be, traditional non-asset based, stepping into, more of an asset light model and wanting to have control over their own trailer pools. So really, it runs the entire gamut. With each one of those, we might have specific customer types that may be ideal for us. But the beautiful thing is that we can typically add value to anybody in the logistics space, so long as you have a need for a trailing asset.
Yeah, that's really interesting. This is why I love startups, because our customer profiles and use cases continue to, I won't say change, but expand and evolve, because you a lot of times have an initial idea of sort of creating flexible trailer pools. But then you mentioned, as warehouse space is at a premium, people might be using more trailers as storage, and then being able to access capacity for storage and things like that. So I would imagine, it's just fun to see these use cases continue to expand and evolve. And it kind of gets just to like a vision question on you don't necessarily have to speak on behalf of the company, but your vision as Chief Product Officer, and Patrick and Spencer, who are good friends as well, what do you guys see as the vision of the future of freight and role in that future?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll start with the future of freight in some way. And, Spencer, we've talked about this too, is that, we largely think, I'll borrow a concept, we think the future is CASE, and is an acronym. So it'll be connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. And we've mentioned, the power source that we play with is not as big of a concern for us. Of course, the grids and where assets will be located is a factor. But, the first 3 letters there, an acronym, the connected, autonomous, and shared, is something that we are hyper aware of. And so, we are building a platform that can serve well the future industry. An industry that wants to have shared collaboration across organizations, or even better collaboration, an intra-company. So we focus heavily on connectivity tools, whether that just be a chat functionality at different pieces in the platform, or in your case, how do we work well with telematics providers, or on-site cellular networks. And so that's something we're thinking of from that standpoint. In a world of autonomous vehicles, interchanges will happen very quickly. And to maximize utilizations around expensive assets like that, you've got to have a platform that can get a trailer autonomous roadworthy in the time that it will need, and it will be needed. And so, in a future state, we're building to have that type of reliability and speed kind of in our interchange process. And then, of course, the one that we most on is, and where we comfortably live, is in the world of shared. And so we do believe that, assets may be looked at differently and will become kind of business models in and of themselves. And so, we are positioning ourselves to enable everybody in that world to hopefully take as best advantage as possible of an economy that is shared. Much like we see in the consumer world today, you'll see more and more of that into the B2B space, and particularly the logistics space, and even more specifically with assets that are largely standardized, like a dry van trailer, that are just for sharing and are nomadic in nature. So that's a big piece of what we see the industry going towards. I'll tell you, we also see, like a lot of people do, it's not our own theory here, but you see, more and more consolidation across the industry with mergers and acquisitions. You see kind of freight running through fewer and fewer hands, maybe at the top, but then towards the bottom and who's actually carrying the loads out, you see greater fragmentation, particularly at a regional and local level. And so how do all those parties work well together, and how do assets, utilized as efficiently and responsibly as possible, as a world that we try to play in? And then we see a lot of convergence. A lot of these a lot of these transportation companies that maybe are historically an OTR asset heavy company is kind of converging more towards 6+ asset light company. You see a lot of traditional that have never had assets kind of converging to the middle place as well. We think we're a strong tool to enable really wherever your starting point is, we can kind of help you get to the carrier of the future or the service provider of the future. So that's a somewhat of where we see things going and how we fit into it without getting too detailed.
Yeah, you answered both pieces at once, which was great. And also, you've shared that acronym with me before, but it just dawned on me as you explained it, the autonomous piece of, being able to how at least long haul autonomous tractors could partner with to get a trailer from point A to point B. It doesn't necessarily have to get to a dock. It could get to, a truck parking outside of a city, which is, where autonomous vehicles are going to be able to start. And I could see how that partners really well. And the need for your customers, for you guys to be able to not just display assets that are available, but also potentially move them around to various places where they can be accessible. So I thought that was really interesting, and it's blown over my head the first 4 times you've explained that to me, and now I finally get it. When folks lease assets from you, is it generally for, and I'm trying to balance, future vision with current now, do they lease assets for a week, a day, a month, a year, all the above? But you probably see more of one than the other. What does that journey look like for the operators who lease the assets?
Sure. I think, our average reservation period is like 52 days. It's grown up some. I think even like a month and a half ago, I would have told you it was but as you see freight volume slowing down, you've seen it with kind of, unfortunately, head count as well across organizations. Assets, people are, anticipating that they will not, need to utilize potentially their entire fleet, at least as regularly, as consistently as they have been. So we see more and more kind of what we call long-term leases available. That's for us, that's still a year. So days are, trending upwards right now, which, it falls right in line with what, the greater industry is seeing there. But with that being said, from a volume basis, we are actually seeing greater number of, especially recently, shorter term leases. So even something a week or less, as we start to have greater adoption kind of in drop hook pools and that sort of thing. So overall, we see the industry trending, or the product trending, to where, we'll have reservations that are more closely aligned with the time frame of a single shipment or maybe a round trip. But as we sit here today, we're still in the multi-month as our average for reservation. And I'll say that varies by asset type too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Flatbeds, reefers go out longer. You're going to see dry vans have shorter time frames.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense given the distribution of the volume of each type of asset out there. Tell us about your journey to, I love your journey into, and now as product officer, I think it's really interesting, and how you merged into that role and fit that role so well within the company, as I've seen you guys over the past year. Tell us about your journey into becoming a chief product officer, and then I'll ask I want to hear a little bit about the day-to-day and how you balance things for the long term as well. But you're a lawyer by trade, right?
Yeah. Well, I graduated from Ole Miss. I caught a little flight last time for my representation, so I made sure that my pullover today was
right.
That's right. And go Rebels. I live with a divided heart, but I just tell people I've got a big heart, maybe. But no, it takes us back to actually where Spencer and I met. And so that's really maybe the origin story for how I got to. But there's definitely some time in between. And so, yeah, I graduated with a law degree from Georgia, and then I went and practiced law in Atlanta for a couple years. I did insurance defense there, and really as an effort to kind of diversify maybe practice of what I was doing, had conversation with a good family friend in Chattanooga by the name of Robert Swift. Actually, Robert recruited me to come up to Chattanooga, where I started working kind of in a dual role in-house with a food distribution company. And then I was also, working with their sister over the road trucking company. It was a produce hauler, as well as had a few other kind of businesses entwined in that. But the trucking company is really what I gravitated towards and was the kind of the biggest opportunity there. And, I knew nothing. I didn't know what a load board was. I hardly knew what the word dispatch meant at that time, but jumped into it, really pretty quickly, thrown in the fire, and overnight really realized that this is something that I could do for a long time, or an industry that I really clicked with. And that was back in kind of 2019. And so it was actually during the middle of a kind of a freight recession at that time. The global economy was doing fine, but at that time it was a difficult time to be in transportation. And so we realized pretty quickly that a freight brokerage would be more sustainable and would actually scale a lot better than an asset-based carrier, at least with the crew that we had. And so we quickly realized that was the route we were going to go. So I had the great fortune of partnering with a guy named Scott Hughes. We started a company called Topo Logistics that he and some of the original partners are still running. They're doing an awesome job. Really cool company, growing right downtown Freight Alley in Chattanooga. But that's where I really was able to kind of cut my teeth in the transportation logistics space as an operator. And in that, and starting a company, you vet a lot of software providers. And so, we looked at a lot of tracking providers, a lot of visibility providers, TMS providers. And so I kind of got a buffet of what was out there, legacy, as well as new entrants and folks being pretty disruptive, and really kind of gravitated and fell in love with the FreightTech logistics scene. Had been around for a couple of years before that, but at that time was really blowing and going, and they still are. And so it was really cool to be kind of immersed in that whole world. And right around that same time, Spencer came back into my life and mentioned that he had been up in Chattanooga meeting with some folks about starting a business in the transportation logistics space, and gave me the rundown on. And at that time, he and Pat were thinking about quitting their jobs back in 2020, and was able to maybe encourage them to, or play a small part in encouraging them to do so. And then in 2021, shortly after they founded it, I was able to make a good transition and join them. And out of the three of us, we were set out to build a software product to transportation companies. And I think I just had the most exposure with software products at that point. And I think my maybe time in law school and a time at the firm in Atlanta helped me pick up concepts quick and, kind of learn a different language relatively quickly, and just communicate with new folks or new, kind of new disciplines in a way that positioned me really well to just sort of to fall into that role. And so I really got into it from a standpoint of truly kind of project and somewhat product management out of the gate, which was let's find some contractors and let's find an engineer, and someone has to make sure that we're doing things on time and above board. And, I don't know that I did well at that, but that's how I got into it. Immediately started cut my teeth on, writing stories and, figuring out what a roadmap looks like and, that sort of thing. And from there, we've grown to a full-time engineering staff of, we've got 6 engineers on staff full-time and a few more contractors. And we've got one other that I work with, and looking to scale that here pretty soon. But yeah, it's been a ton of fun to play a part in from the kind of product perspective. We get to, whether people like it or not, we kind of touch everything, and we get to interact with our customers a ton, which is really cool.
That's a great story. And also I was wondering where it makes a lot of sense how you saw so many technology providers as you were starting this brokerage and as you were working, with the trucking company, that you kind of got a chance to see what's good. I did the same when I was at, by the way, in different industries, but I was always vetting, technology providers, and sort of got to see what's good, not just on the sales side, but you sort of get to see what does good look like in the communication, the materials of what the product looks like. How well is the product documented? How well, how much have you thought through various use cases? How do you handle edge cases as well? Which I would think someone, with a law degree is fairly detail oriented, which is obviously needed in the product profession as well.
I have a lot of help on the detail, that's for sure.
Well, I know you have a great team, and we've had a chance to interact with your team, and they've been the more communicative and sort of thoughtful that we've had a chance to interact with. Yeah.
Well, thanks for saying that, Spencer. They have said the same. A big piece of what we do relies upon integrations, and so we have the ability we're in a position where we interface a lot with third parties, different vendors, different partners, and right back at you. So I know you're one of the best Slack channels, that's for sure, Slack Connect channels that our team has. I know that.
Well, that's the perfect segue. I wasn't even going to go there yet, but you just set me up for our question, our plug question. So TruckerCloud provides a one integration to telematics providers. We say the fastest way to connect ELDs and telematics to any application. You were actually part of the story of TruckerCloud as we were talking early on, and in going through our onboarding process, and you were kind of like, hey, you guys are kind of like Plaid for ELDs. And I was like, you know what? Yes. But then somebody else said it a couple of weeks later, and it sort of started clicking, and that concept started clicking. But tell us a little bit about the future, or at least how does telematics play into the business and sort of this vision of the future of freight as well, or at least as it applies to universal trailer networks.
Yes, well, it's absolutely huge. So, I mean, imagine Uber without a cell phone, or if Uber tried to function without knowing where you as a rider were, or where you as a driver were. Wouldn't be possible. They had the good fortune of having devices with us every single place we go. In our world, cell phones are not quite as reliable, and what we do have to have is some connectivity to the asset that we're trying to match. And as we know, that's done through telematics. And so from ELDs on the tractor side to their sister with just a bridge or a telematics device on the trailer side, for us to do what we do at scale and we've got to have connectivity to the physical asset that's out in the world. And so, a big piece of this value we provide, we call as a digital asset exchange. Speaking of, we look at it a lot like, exchanging money from institution to institution. That's largely what the ease we're trying to exchange asset from system to system. In our world, there is a physical asset that's out there, though, that has to be accounted for. And we've got to have accuracy from a digital twin standpoint. And so we do that by way of connectivity through ELD devices. And like you said, it's a world that has tremendous growth in the last, since maybe 2016 forward, definitely since. And so there are a lot of parties out there. And so to have a partner like you, that we don't have to go out and create, 29, 35, whatever the number is at today, desperate integrations with all these different providers, if we can just have kind of a one-to-many easy onboarding flow, that's super valuable for our customers. It makes it easy, rewardable for them to connect, take the time, which isn't really all that much, through you all to connect their devices or their providers. At that point, we can, really add power. So that's our kind of integration front number one. We've got telematics integrations as our first priority, which we worked a fair amount through with your help, and it's on system integrations for us, where we can integrate with TMSs and warehouse management systems, yard management systems, and all that's about meeting our customers where they are.
Appreciate that. And we've got, you actually led it right into my next question. You got me thinking about, you said, system integrations, warehouse management, the TMSs. I'll phrase this from my perspective as well. When we're working in product in startups, we're always building things for people today and for specific customers. And we're also trying to build for our vision for the future. And some of these integrations, especially I know telematics and warehouse and TMSs, they're necessary in order to execute on a project. Sometimes they're not all that exciting. They help you close a customer and work with a customer and execute on that project, but you're not building, how are we going to connect autonomous vehicles to trailers and get something from point A to point B, and not really fulfilling the full vision. So as a chief product officer and as a member of your engineering and product team, how do you guys think about, and maybe you don't think about it long term like this, so maybe it's just a day-to-day, how do you handle what we have to do now versus we've got to keep thinking about building for the future and sort of pushing the envelope so that we can at least start to sell the things that we think that the company's going towards and the future freight is going towards? How do you guys balance those?
Yeah, it's difficult and can be distracting. I was talking to Brian, who I work with very close today, about, we should all have just a car filter, air filter or something sitting on our desk reminding us that that's who we are. And that's what our role is to be a good filter. You can't block everything out, but you can't let everything in either. And so, you're constantly just trying to decipher, what are our priorities today and what are our long-term priorities. And it's kind of our job to sit there and make sure we're not tripping over anything, but at the same time, our eyes remain kind of down the road as much as possible. But what that looks like really is, you've got to have a core product that people can use and can function on a daily basis that serves their need. Can I go online and get a trailer with a click of a button as promised? And so the answer to that has to remain yes. And there's got to be a certain level of functionality involved in that and a joyful user experience that people are going to continue to come back to it. But with that being said, you can't go all in on today's user knowing that user will change in time, or that profile will change in time. And fortunately, Spencer, APIs today have made that pretty amazing. So, what we can do at this point is if you build an infrastructure properly, which thankfully our team is amazing and is, I think, doing a great job of today, is we can be pretty flexible and nimble going forward. So, we can create a user experience kind of from our website that hopefully serves people well, but at the same time, really most of it's kind of done behind the scenes at the API layer. So pretty quickly you can build out flows and system-to-system integrations, which we think will be the future. And so it's a constant kind of balance of figuring out, what are the demands of today and how, if we're solving for those, how do we do that in a way that we can leverage kind of for the longer term vision, whether that's 12 months out from now or whether that's 5 years out from now.
You mentioned things in sort of a flexible way, and that's been something that's been on my mind a lot recently, and that's probably on your mind a lot as well. Is, I find that when we're building, we don't always know what the future is going to look like. We think, we have an idea of what our vision of the future looks like, at least in our industries, and as it applies to our companies and to our product. And it can be hard to build things in a flexible way. But as long as we're thinking about building them in a flexible way, I find that, we're setting ourselves up for the future well, as those use cases, like we talked about at the beginning, they expand and they evolve. And as long as we build flexibly, we can continue to fulfill those use cases. It's almost like when I do this with my team, we're scoping certain things out, and I'll go, but build it in a way that if this happens, we're still able to use this integration. We're still able to use this data in the way that we're collecting this. And I would think, that's the challenge of any software organization, especially at our stages where we're building a lot of the infrastructure that will live for a long time, hopefully, that we're building.
Yeah, Spencer, I'll add to that too. One thing that's really helpful is, our team is a great mix of, technologists first and logistics people first. And, we share the kind of the good with each other and create a pretty powerful team on that front. And so, in many ways, you can kind of get lost in the future or lost in ideas if you come at it strictly from a technology standpoint, or maybe sometimes you can get stuck in your ways if you come at it direct, too much from the kind of historical trucking and transportation side of things. So it's a good balance there. And what it helps us do, Spencer, is look for kind of the constant and the consistence that we think will remain true. So technologies can change, business models may change in certain ways, but at the end of the day, people say trucking is trucking, and it's true. I mean, you've got goods that need to move from point A to point B. There's going to be a tractor involved. There's going to be a trailer involved, or some kind of power source and some kind of box that those goods are going to be hauled in. And so those things remain true. And so if you can think about what's constant, what's going to definitely be there in the future, or we think is going to be there because it has been over the last 70 years and whatnot, you stay largely on track, or between the mustard and the mayonnaise, as they say. And then from there, you have a fair playground even within that space as well. But yeah, I think honestly, our combination of our operational experience, transportation, combined with folks from the technology side, allows us to do a really good job of saying, hey, this is what our users and our industry struggles with today, this is what they will probably struggle with tomorrow as well. And then, 10 years from now, we can expect X, Y, Z. So that blend really, really helps us and takes a lot of the burden off of any one person from having to say, this is the vision we're going after, or, this is how we do something today and build for tomorrow. We've got a really strong team that is a great kind of resource for helping make sure that vision, or, what we're doing, our roadmap and our vision is grounded, but at the same time, very innovative.
That blend is really important, and I'm glad you brought it up. I've seen that in other companies where if you only have one, that person becomes a bottleneck, potentially, or that process becomes a bottleneck. And then if you create a bottleneck, let's say you only have one logistics expert, and that that becomes a bottleneck to building things. If you can't get on their calendar for 4 days, but a developer's been assigned a story, how do you get that story done? Well, you can do two things. You can wait, or you can build without having all the information that's required. And so I think that is really important to have both sides of that. It just helps you, I'm sure, move faster as an organization. Well, we're coming up on time, but I want to take a second or a couple of minutes, or as long as you would like, and ask if there's anything that you'd like to share that I haven't asked, or any questions that you would like to ask on this podcast, or you'd like me to ask you.
Well, I'll ask you, Spencer, where do you future state of freight and telematics from that standpoint? What are big things that we should have on our horizon? We're somebody who consumes telematics data, by the millions of rows on a daily basis. So, what's something maybe that we should have on our mind, or as we kind of go out into the future?
Yeah, I think that telematics systems they're just getting smarter. And there are more systems that are getting smarter. So you think about ELDs when they first came out, it was a log for hours of service, and then there are certain companies out there that found, hey, these ELDs generally have location data coming with them. We can track loads with them, do these sorts of things. Now you've continued to see more of an evolution of the data that's provided by telematics companies, as well as the ways that data can be used. And not just to there's a lot of there's a lot of heartache out there, in the industry among some companies and individuals who see telematics as an invasion of privacy. And I think that these telematics devices and companies and data can really be used to the carrier's benefit in so many ways. If I'm a fleet manager, like, of course I would like to have more information on my fleet and how they're driving, and potentially be able to, mold that into getting better rates on insurance, or being able to lease assets through REPOWR, or being able to utilize assets more effectively. And so I think sort of telematics 2.0, we're seeing more data coming off of devices, fleets using more types of devices. I think that cameras have been selling a lot faster than ELDs, especially as ELDs were mandated. And now, you're only getting basically ELD turnover or new drivers. But cameras are becoming more ubiquitous because it's actually a safety measure for drivers. You're also seeing companies develop, smart trailers with sort of like OEM embedded telematics devices, IoT devices that can measure the weight of a trailer as it's on and give that information off continuously. So as you think about, REPOWR, you could potentially get into sort of the LTL, like asset utilization, maximization. If you're understanding like axle capacity, as something drops something off here, and then does that create capacity within that trailer, and you could read that off the axle weight and suggest another LTL load that becomes available. So I think just the maturation of the data that's provided, the frequency that it can be streamed, and then how that data can be utilized is just going to continue to explode, which is why we exist, because we want to, we don't want you guys to have to go out and integrate with 30 or 60 or 100 different devices and then model and figure out how to map all of those components. And so that's what we see our role to be in telematics. And at least my thoughts are what I'm seeing in the industry in terms of where telematics are going. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, that's great. We're excited. Thankful that we're not the ones tasked with solving for all of that. So thank you very much for doing it. We just kind of continuously closely monitor what data is available in newer and newer devices as things get smarter and smarter. And then we'll consume what is available to us and make best use of it, which is where our time is best spent. And we're allowed to do that with, partner like you all. So thanks.
You guys are solving plenty complex problems on your own. Well, AJ, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for joining today. And this is still going to be our first podcast release, but our second attempt. I think this one went almost as well, but it will definitely have better audio than our first one. So, but just really appreciate you joining today. Really appreciate you as a partner, what you bring to the industry, and I look forward to catching up again soon.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Spencer. Really appreciate it, man. Have a great rest.
You too. Bye.